but I'm interested in them as people. I'm interested in their struggle, or their individual struggles. And I can relate to a lot of that, being a gay man who, has had my own share of stuff thrown at me. Um,
And
so to say,
I think that the compassion is so important. But what strikes me as you're talking about this, and as I've talked to other people, is that the people who are really fueling the trans movement are not people who are gender dysphoric, as you mentioned before.
yes, and I think
They're
this is
not, and that's to me so confounding trying to put this together, because the people who are genuinely gender dysphoric, in my view, are probably not a threat to women. If they go into women's bathrooms, they are
yes,
doing their darndest to pass.
and they don't want to be seen.
And they don't want to be seen as aggressive. They don't want to be seen as male. But
And this is where we now
it's
get
this
to a
other
much darker
group.
side of it.
Yeah, and
Yes,
it's this other group who is like appropriated this
yes.
gender dysphoria and
Well, they appropriate
transgenderism, and they're not
everything.
even gender dysphoric, but they're trying now to insinuate themselves into every aspect of
Yes.
LGBT and into women, and it's just it is very confusing.
Um, it's like now, if we just imagine the camel is in the hut and we're outside, now they're kicking the walls down.
Right.
It's particularly coming from the non-binary trans contingent. Yesterday I saw a tweet by a non-binary person, so we can't call them a girl or a guy, but they were obviously a girl, and they had their breasts amputated. So, and they said in the tweet, my top surgery doesn't make me a man. And
So
then
now we're having women
other
just randomly amputate their breasts so they can be non-binary.
non-binary. So I don't know if they even identify as trans now, but what they're clearly saying is, I'm not a man. I just had my breast amputated, although they use the phrase top surgery. And then lots of other younger ones jumping onto that saying, oh, that's exactly how I feel. Now, then I wonder, what does this say about our society? And has she had that procedure because she feels objectified with the breasts, or because she feels they're not good enough breasts? Who knows? But then I thought, if you're now having surgeries like that without wanting to actually transition, then that again opens up a whole new side to this. And I think because they're younger, some people might watch this and say, well, you're just saying that because you're old. um, I think we're a bit more grounded in reality. I think the younger ones, they've come to believe that whatever they feel and think is who they are, and
Well,
that you
and they've
can't
also,
question
these
it.
girls have been sexualized. That's something that really bothers me, that girls are being sexualized at a younger and younger age. And so it's
Yeah,
no wonder to me they want to
they want out.
separate themselves from that.
Yes, and we're seeing that with the girls that are presenting with gender dysphoria. The way I see it is they want to get away from the sexualization and the objectification, whereas a number of men and guys transitioning, they want to be
They
sexualized.
want it. In fact,
They
I
want
see
to be
so much
objectified.
about these the transgender, the guys who have transitioned, and or a lot of times they've not gone through all these procedures. I guess idogonophilic would probably be the
Yeah,
term used.
right. So
And
there's
they're like really into promoting sex work as work, and
porn.
and let's all have sex and have a great time, and kids can be sexual too. And so there are all these different messages coming at these kids, and it's just got to be incredibly confusing.
Right. And Teen Vogue, for example, is putting out a lot of stuff about how to have anal sex, how to use vibrators. This is for teens. It's Teen Vogue. And Monroe Bergdorf is now on the cover of Teen Vogue, to celebrate that she's a Black trans woman of color. So it ticks all the oppression Olympics boxes. And she Instagrammed that or tweeted that and said, I can't believe that I'm on the cover of Vogue. She said Vogue rather than Teen Vogue. And, dreams really can come true. And again, it's selling that myth of you can become this beautiful, magical creature, when obviously it was photoshopped to death. There's a ton of makeup involved. And
Well, and it's a really mixed message to give to
and
kids.
also, she got the
This is
facial
beautiful.
feminization surgery because she did a TV show, so she got it for a deal or for free. Um, but it's not a surprise, because guess who the editor is of Teen Vogue? It's a trans woman.
Oh.
Trans woman. You're still with the Mormon Church?
Oh, I'm not Mormon. I just grew up in
Oh,
Utah.
oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Okay, but you'll recognize these references. So her first name is Lucy. What does that make you think of?
Lucy?
Yeah?
Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds.
Nice one. Now think biblical.
No, no, I didn't grow up
Okay,
religious.
all right. Lucifer.
Oh, okay. Yeah, see, I'm interesting.
Their
So that's,
surname, their surname is Diavolo, which is Greek for
wow.
devil.
Oh,
Their,
wow.
their Twitter handle is Satan's Jacuzzi.
Oh,
And they wear a baseball cap that says 666. Now, this may all
wow.
be an act of sorts, but this
It's
is the
still
kind
just
of,
really creepy.
this is a trans woman who is the editor of Teen Vogue, getting another trans woman on the cover, at the same time putting out all this highly sexualized stuff for girls. And what was interesting in the Teen Vogue thing about anal sex, that there was some kind of visual, somebody told me, where they actually removed the clitoris in the visual because it was all about the pleasure for the person inserting the penis, not the girl. And this
Wow.
is where it's like, are these articles teaching children how to recognize what they like? Are they helping them to set boundaries? Or is it all about this pornification? There's another really sinister trend now that you get these younger trans young males who identify as trans, who go into toilets, into ladies' toilets, get their penis out and take selfies in front of the mirror. That's a thing now. And it goes a step deeper, where you now have the sissy bimbo femboys. Have you heard about those?
No.
You couldn't make this up. And this is why it's so important to to look at the camel. What is the camel doing? When you permit something, you're promoting it. What are you promoting? What are you enabling? Enabling is a big word in this. What are we enabling
Yes.
by not being critical? So sissy bimbo femboys are very super duper effeminate guys that would make me look butch, which by the way is what my name means in Dutch. My parents have a funny sense of humor. Sissy bimbo femboys are super duper effeminate, and they fantasize about being forced to transition. And then,
Oh,
right? So it's almost like some people have rape fantasies.
and they have
They
transition
have
fantasies.
forced transition fantasies. The
Wow.
outcome of the transition is them as a hugely pornified idea of a slim, super duper effeminate person with what they call big milkers.
Oh,
But the reason that bimbo is included in this term is because they want to be dumb. They want to have no brain. And again, this comes from a man's interpretation of what a woman should be like in porn. So it's sexist,
yikes.
it's
Oh,
sexist, it's misogynistic, and
wow.
this is now stuff that we have to applaud and say stunning and brave. These are the people that now should be given rights. That
In fact, their their feelings are going to supersede the rights of women and children. And
you want these people close to your children. Is that what?
yeah, I
Now,
mean,
I'm
that's
not
really
saying this
disturbing.
is everyone, but this is happening. It's
Well,
online.
and that's where the pushback I see coming, because I'm hearing it more and more. And you even mentioned it a little bit earlier about the pride parades,
Right.
where increasingly the pride parades are becoming an opportunity just to sort of really do whatever. And so you
Turn
have
up in your
pictures
fetish.
of, you know, of gay men who are in collars and impersonating
Yeah.
dogs and wearing a G-string, and
The
a lot of
G-strings I don't mind,
sexuality.
but I'm
Pardon?
biased. The G-strings I don't mind.
You don't mind.
And
But it is,
I,
it's like they just keep pushing and pushing and pushing.
right. And
And
then my parents keep
eventually
asking
people are going to say no more. Like there's going to be a pushback.
we're already
And
seeing this. So in Poland, they now have LGBT free zones,
oh, wow.
and the EU has applied sanctions to them. But I think part of this is now, you know, people on the right and the religious right, they're like, we've had enough of this. And it's affecting every single person who is under this so-called umbrella. And this is why in the UK we've seen a political separation where Stonewall is like the big charity here and lobbying group. So people from Stonewall have left and set up the LGBT Alliance to fight for sex-based rights.
Yes.
And that's why with this ideology and what I call this cultural lobotomy, the ones who are most at risk are women and girls. And then second, gay men. And one thing that really upset me, and this is for me a big blow with the hammer and the ice pick, is that dictionary.com have removed the word homosexual. And okay, so I thought sometimes if a trans woman says, I feel invalidated, then I thought, wow, is that what this feels like? And I cried because it's taken me 4 decades to get to a place where I feel so good in myself as a gay man that I've actually started using the word homosexual because I'm happy to be a man who wants to be with men. I want to share my life with a man. And sexually, I'm attracted to men's bodies. And a man's body is very different from a woman's body. And a man's body comes with a penis. And it's like, don't you go calling me a genital fetishist, especially the people who are having their genitals reconstructed to be something else. Like, you're the fetishist here, not me.
Well, and the focus does seem to be on the genitals for the trans people because they talk about, their girl penis and
girl dick.
Yeah, the girl dick. And what was so interesting to me when J.K. Rowling made her statements, which were incredibly innocuous, they were not transphobic.
And very compassionate.
And very compassionate. But she was threatened, over and over again. It was suck my girl dick. I'm going to choke you with my girl dick.
Well,
it was these
even one of my friends who is trans wrote that on Facebook. And I wanted to write back saying, I'm the person who visited you in hospital the day after it was inverted. So why are you saying suck my girl dick?
Yeah. Well, and it's a very, that's a really violent thing to say. I mean, this is for some reason, it's okay for men to say, suck my girl dick, and nobody's standing up for women. And one of the things that I experience that's just been sort of fascinating. I'm a small woman. I'm barely 5'2" on a good day if I've got shoes on. So I testified at a hearing about trying to limit children's access to these interventions. And as I came out, there were trans women who were just lining the hallway, and they were towering over me. I mean, they were clearly men, but for some reason they were able to call me a cunt and a bitch and a whore. And they were, just as I was just walking this gauntlet of these men in makeup and wigs who were harassing me. And I can't imagine any other case where men could do that to a woman and be applauded for being stunning and brave, and the woman would be considered the Nazi or the fascist.
So, now what we see here is typical male pattern of violence, abuse, and intimidation. And some research is now coming up that shows that crimes committed by trans women follow a male pattern. What I think is really unjust is that these crimes are now recorded against women.
Right.
So it's not your crime, but it's recorded against as a woman's crime. And this is where I think that as a society, we've gone too far. It's like, whoa, what happened? How come that this was all allowed? But there is a bigger thing going on here, which is an attack on biology. Okay, and this is what all this is about, all this changing in language, all this inversion that's happening, why homosexual is now taken out of dictionary.com. Merriam-Webster is following suit because they've changed it from just being a descriptor, which it was. They now say it's an offensive descriptor. Now, I've been called many things in my life for being gay that I can't repeat here, but never have I been called by someone homosexual.
You homosexual.
No.
Well, and it's interesting because my understanding is that Merriam-Webster has changed the definition of woman, officially changed the definition to be somebody who identifies as a female.
They've added that in as another explanation. Yeah. So this is where the language is seeping in. And here are some examples from last week. So they took homosexuality out. Why? Because it says sexuality, which means it's based on biological sex. It needs to go because gay and lesbian is an identity that you can identify into if you're a trans man, right?
Right.
That's why a trans woman can be a lesbian, and lesbians have penises. It's all to validate that stuff. So if you are a person who says, I'm a cis man, you're part of that. You're part of that vocabulary and therefore those beliefs. But most people go, oh yeah, I'm cis, because they don't think about it. They don't know what they're talking about. So another example, we have a chain of drugstores called Superdrug, and they've just launched a new range of sanitary pads, and it's uses inclusive language,
Right.
which means it doesn't have the word woman on it. Instead, it says this is for a person who menstruates. And they said, we want to be as inclusive as possible. No, what you're doing is you're erasing the concept of woman as a biological reality. TED London, you know, TED Talks,
Mm-hmm.
they now spell London, not London, but Lxndxn,
Oh
because it's
no.
inclusive.
Oh no.
There's three
That's just
more.
horrible.
Two more. Aberystwyth University is in Wales. They have now banned drag socials, as in a
Oh,
bunch
I
of
saw that because it
clothes.
was somehow demeaning or mocking of drag
Right.
people. And I'm like, well, isn't drag
Well,
somewhat mocking?
particularly trans.
Right.
So you can only do it if you're doing it to celebrate LGBT plus culture. Now, how are you going to decide that? Because if one guy is really trying hard to celebrate it, but looks like an absolute idiot because he doesn't know what to do with makeup and a wig, then suddenly they're phobic. How are you going to police that? The other thing is that New Scientist magazine, they ran an article on endometriosis, which, as you know, is something that only women have, but you can't say that now. So in their headline, and this is a science magazine,
Yeah.
endometriosis affects 1.5 million of those assigned female at birth. Have you heard of it?
Wow.
And I thought, well, I haven't heard of that, but I have heard of the word woman.
Yes.
And this is where I'm like, the buck needs to stop.
Yeah.
Now,
And the
there was
language gets so convoluted because somebody corrected me once. I said something about women and she said, that's cervix havers. And I'm like,
no.
you want me to call myself a cervix haver? Like,
No.
like that's just absurd.
So who is now reducing who to body parts?
Right. Yeah.
It's so contradictory. And there was one trans guy on Instagram, and he thought he was going to be clever. And he said, oh, isn't it funny how cervix sounds like sir? And how menstruation has the word men.
Men.
And I'm like, no, that is from mensa, which means moon or month. You know, it doesn't mean what you are trying to read into it. And this is why we have
fascism has cis in it. So there you go.
But that actually works in their favor because they are now using cis as a slur.
It is.
So they talk about the system and die cis scum. People are having this tattooed on their bodies. And this is all just gone like a run. It's like a runaway train.
And yet for me to to misgender someone is hate speech and violence, but they're able to threaten to, gag J.K. Rowling with their girl.
Right. That's allowed, but you get thrown off Twitter for saying I support trans women, but you can't change your biological sex.
Right.
So here we see, because some of the questions that you've asked in your other videos were like, how did it get to this? Well, the social media big players are very powerful. They can hide hashtags. They can hide likes. They can not show things. So the LGBT Alliance in the UK, they're a charity fighting for sex-based LGBT rights. They have been denounced by senior MPs of the Labour Party, which is the opposition, as a hate group.
Wow.
And as a result, YouTube, they do have a YouTube channel, but YouTube doesn't send out notifications when they put a new video up.
Wow.
So these social media giants, and who's making these decisions? Is that really a fair, ethical thing going on there? Or is that a couple of developers who are making their mind up for the rest of the world and who is telling them what to do? So what's interesting, when you start seeing which people are where, who are the pulling the strings? So at Facebook, they released 50 odd new genders that you could register with. Why was that put in place? By, of course, a software developer who is trans and who posts pictures all pouting and showing their cleavage. And I think it's just an autogynephile. So who are the people pulling the strings and follow the money? the sinister thing about all this that we've been talking about is that this is not even the end game.
Right.
All of the trans stuff
It's
is
just,
a stepping stone.
yeah.
What's next, do you think?
I can't even imagine. I'm thinking it's acceptance of pedophilia as a sexual orientation.
Even further.
Even further than that, I think it's erasing all differences. We basically, it sort of reminds me a little bit of communism, where we're all just going to be a cog, because we're going to, eventually, if our differences aren't based in reality, then we aren't based in reality.
And that's the heart of it. So the next step, and all this trans stuff is just priming us as a society so that we can accept without question what's coming next. And that's transhuman.
Right.
So they're now disqualifying anything that's rooted in biological reality, that biology isn't real anymore, so that humanity isn't based on biology anymore. Because a question I had a few weeks ago was like, if, this whole trans women are women thing, that basically says that it begs the question, what makes a woman?
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, what makes a man? And therefore, what makes us human? But I didn't think further than that, because, who thinks about these things? But the person driving all the transhuman stuff, where basically medicine and technology come together to provide whole new treatments and services, we need to be a susceptible audience. So if we can swallow all the trans stuff, we can swallow the transhuman stuff.
Because we would just be bigots if we didn't accept it.
Well, we'd be beyond that.
Yeah.
Right? And guess who is leading this? A trans woman.
Right.
Called
Right.
Rosenblatt.
Really, and that's what I noticed. The Pritzker is here in the U.S., I believe, and that's a trans woman who is pushing all this, providing funding for all these, initiatives to.
What's her name?
Pritzker, Jennifer Pritzker, who is got just oodles and oodles of money, who goes in and builds the gender clinics at various hospitals and provides all this money to schools and such. So it's I think that the bottom line is that if we can't be grounded in reality, anything can happen. That
anything goes.
Yeah, anything goes. And then it can get very, very scary. And the other thing that disturbs me is seeing the anger, the hatred that is being encouraged, so that, instead of me just being someone who has a different opinion, I am now a Nazi who deserves to be put up against the wall and killed. And that is the kind of language that's being used by people in this movement. And so it is not about tolerance. And it's very scary when you start allowing, and they're able to have these violent views and spew this violence because they're oppressed and we're the oppressors. And so it really is anything goes. And at some point, if it's not stopped, I really fear for the next generation.
Well, I fear for this generation and the younger ones, because it seems that they've grown up in a very different world. I mean, obviously, plenty of people kids still grow up in very poor, bad circumstances. But if you compare, say, your parents' generation, and I consider my grandparents who lived through the war,
right,
the Second World War, and lost so much. And then my parents, when they were born, they sort of saw their parents build society back up, which took a long time. Yeah. It didn't just happen overnight. It's not like the war ended and they stopped rationing food. It was hard. My parents saw them build the country back up. And then, things got better. And we started having TVs and vacuum cleaners and kids who grow
up plenty of food, so much food that we're able to be eating way more food than we should be eating.
Right, which is causing all sorts of other problems. Now, my parents, when they moved into their first home, everything was secondhand. Everything was gifted by friends and family. And even I had that when I first moved into a place. And you accept these things and you're grateful for them. But now it's like these kids, they demand the best of everything right now. Like as an 8-year-old, I was happy with a little Lego toy, whereas now they have their iPads and their
Right.
this and their that. And it's like there seems to be a sense of entitlement
Yes.
and an inherent narcissism with the younger generations. And they really believe everything they feel and think. It's
Right. That their feelings
like,
define reality.
I mean, the first thing that a psychologist will tell you to do if you have very strong emotions is take a step back,
Hmm.
take five. What is going through you? Because feelings are indicators, nothing more.
Right.
So you get the feeling, I got a feeling, hoo, hoo, and you
And
go, okay, let's pay attention to this. What is this telling me about myself and where I am in the situation? How can do I go along with this? Just woof, yeah,
well,
swept
and
away.
also that we have some degree of control over that. We, that when we get a feeling, we can analyze it and determine, yeah, this is a legitimate feeling, or maybe like, wait a minute, this is, I need to like work on this a little bit because I'm overreacting, or I'm not responding to
Exactly.
the situation in a reasonable way.
What is it that's being triggered in me that wants to react so
Right.
strongly?
Yeah.
Rather than just lashing out. But again, as I said earlier, they keep trying to bring it down to that base level where it's all about these primary reactions and primary emotions, and it's just fight, flight, survival.
Yeah.
Now, had I been with you when you were doing whatever, the walk of shame with these people towering over you, calling you a Nazi and whatever else, I would have burst into song and gone, I'm a bitch, I'm a lover, I'm a child, I'm a mother, and just have some fun with it somehow. But it's incredible how, and I thought this was just online, but 2 weekends ago, I saw it in real life in London, in Hyde Park, where there was a small group of women called Stand Up for Women.
Oh, Posey Parker,
Yep.
Venice Allen, and yeah, they're just out there. They're putting it out there, and they're saying enough, enough, enough.
So I wanted to meet them because it's women that have been fighting this fight for at least 10 years. And I think as men, especially as gay men, we owe them such a debt of gratitude for beating their drum, for not trying to be intimidated, even though they're being cancelled and they're being called all the worst things in the world. The Nazi thing is something that keeps coming back. The worst thing I've seen online so far was a trans person saying, and this is where I'm like, have you completely lost all touch with reality? How can you say such a thing? They said, if Hitler was trans, you'd still have to use the right pronoun for them. And I thought, really?
Wow, how does a mind even go there?
Is Hitler the litmus test for trans acceptance and
Wow.
allyship? And then another person,
So assuming you don't use Hitler's preferred pronouns,
you're
you're
transphobic.
worse than Hitler.
You're worse than Hitler. Look, there was a guy in South Africa who was caught, a Danish guy, and this is really distressing, he'd cut off vaginas of a number of women and stored them in his freezer.
Oh.
An article ran about this, and a trans person, and again, I'm not saying all trans person are like this, it's just these are the ones that are the problem that do, either retweeted or re-Instagrammed it and said, you know what's worse than this happening? Calling them female genitalia.
Oh, jeez.
And this is where it's like, now,
Yeah.
let's come back to earth.
Yeah.
Let's come back to reality. You have trans girls who are very pretty going on Instagram or TikTok, and they're shaking their bottles, with the cross-sex hormones. And they're saying, well, actually, we are more female than women
Right. Right.
because, we don't have testosterone. And it's
Right.
like, well, actually, you do. And
Yeah.
it's
Well, or
not
the
just
breasts. I see a lot of them that have the big breasts, and they're very much like, see, I'm more of a woman than you are because I've got my triple D's or whatever.
right. And I don't have a stinking bleeding vagina.
Right. Right.
And
The very thing that defines being a woman on some level.
and that on a very big level. And
Yeah.
they don't even understand that it's not the vagina that bleeds. They don't even know that.
They don't even have that. Yeah.
So there was another person who, and this is where I think you're so deluded.
Yeah.
If you're not rooted in reality, then obviously you're going to take everything as an attack, and you're going to because you don't know how to ground yourself.
Right.
there was another person on, it's always Twitter and so Instagram and that kind of stuff, who had actually, um, you know, created the Star of David that people in the Jews had to wear, but they changed the word Jew to turf.
Oh.
And they said, download this template and print it off. Now, last year, I managed to get in touch with a Holocaust survivor, which to me was incredible because they were liberated in 1945.
Oh, wow.
And here we are in 2019, and I got in touch with them across
Wow.
the ages,
Yeah.
across the world. And I thought, how deeply offensive is it to now say we need a final solution for the turfs?
Yeah.
And when I was in Hyde Park 2 weeks ago, there was a Black Lives Matter protest, and some of them had signs saying Black Trans Lives Matter. And they were very young, late teens, early 20s. They got so aggressive when they saw these women, and they intimidated the group. They tried to push, they came in, and we were nearly squashed against the fence. Some of the material that they had, like a banner, they took it and destroyed it, and not wanting to listen to anything. Like Posey asked one of them, so what, or Venice actually asked one of them, so what's your definition of a woman? Oh my God, I can't believe I have to say this. Oh my God. And it's like, well, I have a definition, and it's adult human female. So if you want to have a chat, you tell me what your definition is.
Trying to engage in a dialogue.
But again, that takes it up to another level, and they want to be in the angry level.
Keep it at that very.
There's something called the ego of activism that looks at why are people drawn to a particular type of activism, which has nothing to do with the cause. It's just because they want to get swept up in that adrenaline and that anger and that aggression and be able to shout and scream and
demonize the otherize people.
Yes, it's very contagious rather, as an energy. And you, like when we were there, it's like you could feel it. It was such a strong feeling. And then I noticed in myself, I started feeling it and wanting to fight back. So you really have to be aware of what's going on and why you are reacting the way you do. Now, when you're on social, I noticed this because I don't use social all that much. But now that I'm starting to chat about these kind of things, I noticed myself, I'm waiting for a notification. I'm waiting for someone to disagree with me, and then I jump on it, like, boom. And, oh, really? You disagree? Boom. You're an idiot. Boom. And like, I keep my language polite, but it's the energy. It's the fight, flight, being
there's definitely an adrenaline, yeah.
There's something about anger. There's a really good quote. There is no angry man who thought his anger unjust.
That's, yeah.
It gives you a sense of...
Yeah.
And it gives you
righteousness.
A sense of power. Like, now I'm not this weedy, oppressed person. Now I'm powerful. Mm-hmm. So again, I always see the human. What's the story? What's going on here? Right. There is so much more to it than just saying trans women are women, trans men are men, non-binary is valid. It's like, let's look at the bigger picture.
There's more going on.
So much more.
Well, Menno, I probably have to get
like 2.5 hours.
I know. Usually I ask guests at the end of the program if they have anything else they want to say. And I suspect with you that you would probably have more. Is there anything that you wanted to touch on that we didn't?
Yes, which was when I actually found that I peaked.
Oh, okay. Do you want to cover that real quick?
Is that okay?
Sure. I think what I'll do is
you can always edit things, right?
I think what I'll do is make this into 2 segments because it's so long. So go ahead.
Right. So I was given a leaflet. So the first time was Pride, and I saw those 2 trans women, and we had a nice chat, and I wished them a nice day. But right behind them were people carrying a sign, trans women are women. I'd never heard that mantra before. Oh. And I just went, no, chamomile, infusion, green tea. Call me anal. I fit the gay stereotype, at least I fit some stereotype. And it made me think, right? It kept niggling at the back of my head, thinking, well, that's just not true. Okay, so I started looking into this. And a few months in, to just reading the odd article here and there, I just thought, this is like opening a can of worms or going down the rabbit hole, and I'm seeing things I'm not liking at all. Okay. And then, so I started getting concerned about what was happening, but I didn't relate it to me. And then I was given this leaflet in February by someone.
What
So
is it?
it's a workshop, a 2-day workshop for men to re-meet the boy they once were. So it's a psychologist who's doing a project, to graduate. And this is inner child work, which is actually, I think, very interesting because it's looking at stuff that's unresolved from before and trying to integrate those experiences and look at it now, looking back at it as an adult and being able to digest what you couldn't digest back then.
Right.
It's really powerful work. And I was like, wow, I'm up for that. I thought the picture was a bit freaky.
Yeah, that's what I was responding to.
Right. It's like the way he's holding him feels very predatory.
Yeah.
And also look at the kid with the hand. It's like, oh no.
Oh, yeah.
Oh. And then the look in the guy's eyes is kind of like,
Got him.
Anyway, on the back it said something. It said this 2-day workshop for 6 participants is open to anyone who identifies as a man.
Oh, so I could have an inner little boy that I need to resolve issues with.
And this is when I peaked in terms of that ideology and thinking, this is just a pile of shit. But it felt, I know people use the word violated a lot these days, and I don't, but I felt violated. I felt like someone was digging their dirty fingers into me through my skin, and they started to inhabit me. And this may sound a bit dramatic, but as I said, there's the things that I've gone through in life or have had to put up with, as in what society gave to me, kids, teenagers, other people, is because I'm a man and a particular kind of man. It's because of me being a biological male with a particular personality and way of carrying myself in the world. That's why you can't just identify your way into that. Like, hold on a second. And then that's when I started to realize this is why women are so offended deeply by someone saying, I feel like a woman. A woman is not a feeling. A man is not a feeling. You can feel masculine or feminine, but they're different things. But women and men, they are biological terms. They are not feeling terms. A feeling is feeling hungry. I guess that's a physical feeling. Feeling tired, that's physical too. But a feeling is feeling happy, it's feeling sad, it's feeling blah, blah, blah. These are feelings. And as we said earlier, they're indicators.
Well, and the other thing is I don't think that their feelings are even accurate. So those who say they feel like women, I don't think they have a clue. I mean, because if they did, then they wouldn't be saying that they're actually women. And I think Zia might have made that point.
Yes. And if you look at women, the way that women and girls are oppressed in the world, if you look at all the girls that have been killed in China because they were girls, it's not because they had a gender identity, it's because they were female.
Yeah, and if it were that easy, all those girls, all those little babies would have identified as boy babies so they didn't get killed. I mean,
they would have identified out of it, right?
Yeah.
Women and girls who are being, traded for the sex trade, that's not because they have a certain identity, it's because they're female. Reality is based on biological truth because it's objective. And as I said earlier, Mother Nature gives you the goods. How you feel about it, that's a whole other thing. How people use it, that's a whole other thing. How people oppress others on the basis of that, that's all human stuff.
But I think what you said is so important, that this is reality. And if feelings start to define reality, then there is no truth. Then there is no nothing that's tangible, nothing that's empirical. And pretty much anybody can do anything and somehow justify it because it's based on feelings. And one of the reasons that we don't do that as a society is because it becomes very dangerous when
you can't organize a society that way.
Yeah, it just doesn't work.
And where do you draw the line? Okay, so a man can identify as a woman. Okay, we've gone along with that for a long time. Okay, so does that mean if a trans woman is a woman, then can a woman be a trans woman without being a trans
Well,
woman?
and that's what I've actually I've often wondered that because my insurance company is kind of funky, and if I were a man identifying as a woman, it would pay for hormones and surgeries, right? And so if I want to have a breast augmentation, then can I say that I'm a man who is identifying as a woman who wants to have that, even though I was assigned female at birth? And that way my insurance would pay for me to have a breast augmentation operation.
Yes, I mean, I could say that I identify as a woman who identifies as a man, but is trapped in a man's body. You know,
Right.
where do you draw the line? And
Yeah.
then they say, oh, you're being disrespectful of trans people. It's like, no, if you could identify as the other sex, which you are not, then can you identify into another ethnicity? And that's all blown up in the last couple of weeks because
Right.
of this
Oh,
Jewish
right. Yeah, that
cancer.
was fascinating.
And it's actually interesting because lots of people on Twitter have been mouthing off saying, well, actually, this is why it's different. It's because, race and ethnicity is being socialized in a different way. Okay, so can you then identify as disabled? Is that
Right.
fair? Can
Right.
you identify as another species? Have you heard of that?
Yes. Or age. I mean, I feel like I want to retire now, so I'm going to identify as a 70-year-old so that I can get
Well,
retirement.
you have that. You have Stephanie who identifies as a 6-year-old girl,
Right.
and it's like, well, does the 6-year-old grow up as you get older, or do they?
Right. Or just
Why are you
you're
caked
stuck
in
there at
makeup?
6.
Because 6-year-olds aren't caked in makeup.
Right.
We have a white man who identifies as a Filipino woman. Now, this is where you see how dangerous it has all become. They are reported in the press as a woman who identifies as a Filipino woman, right? They don't question the sex bit, but they question the Filipino bit. You can now identify as an object. You have people who are moon gender. You can identify as another species. So you have one person, they make videos on YouTube and they identify as a deer, a female deer because they're trans.
Right.
And every now and then they eat a bowl of grass to get in touch with their dear me. Now, what is this trans person fighting for? Trans rights or animal rights? I mean,
That's a good question. And
if if you go back, you just strip it right back. Where do you draw the line?
yeah.
And
Well, and what do you tell children? Because children are doing this all the time. And generally, as adults, we're the ones who sort of create the boundaries and say, okay, you can pretend to be a deer, but you're not really a deer. But now perhaps that is somehow speciesist phobic. And as parents, we're going to get in trouble for doing that. And so when our child says that they're a deer, we should affirm that. I mean,
no,
at what point does this, I mean, do we just give up all of reality and say, whatever a child wants is what they actually are, and that's
no,
doing a child absolutely no good. I
I
mean,
think that it's social media that's making this so much worse.
yeah.
Because they're lapping it all up and they don't have the framework to know, the kids and the teenagers to know what is real and what isn't. Um,
Well, and
and,
they've
and
got
that
adults
shows
who
why
are
it's
supposed to
so,
be an authority who are going
yeah,
along with this, and so
but that's why it's so distressing when they wake up and smell the coffee because they don't know how to process it.
right.
Because like as kids, you and I'm sure, when we were told no, no meant no. We didn't ask again because you get a smack or whatever, you
It's just
or
no.
grounded.
Yeah.
But then parenting changed to being all about negotiating and being your child's friend. And now it's like it's what Bernadette said, parents need to be parents again.
Yes.
Um,
And teachers need to be teachers. I mean, I am a horrible speller. I'm dyslexic, and spelling was horribly difficult for me and still is. And these days, I guess I could just say that, this is how I'm showing my inner feelings, is by misspelling this. And you're oppressing me by trying to make me spell things correctly. I mean, it, it just gets
yeah,
pretty absurd.
you can make, as you said, anything goes. And this is where I feel like I'm at a point, and this, I cannot talk about this with gay men. Very few. And it's very interesting to see that in the UK, the big gay heavyweights, celebrities, they're not speaking up. Again, it's women who have been speaking up. It's lesbians who have been speaking up. It's J.K. taking the flak.
But I suspect gay men are going to start speaking up because now they're coming after you. First, they came after women and children and lesbians. Now they're coming after you and saying that you're transphobic if you have genital preference.
exactly. And I'm like, I choose, you know, or like they're like, you're standing with extreme right people, or you're standing with J.K. Rowling. I say, I stand with myself, and I have a brain, and I'm using it, and I'm seeing things happen. But what's in the UK, we have a couple of gay men who are very influential. You know, they run things like Pink News.
Mm.
They're a member of they're one of the trustees for, say, Mermaids, and they're all in with each other because the trustee and the Pink News guy, they're married,
Oh,
right? And they keep putting all these
wow.
super duper pro trans propaganda articles out. Um, and they are also saying that, you know, oh, the word homosexual is a bad word, you know, it's derogatory and it comes from medicine and it was used to torture us, so it needs to go. So they're part of this. Why? Because it helps them sell more copies or get more advertising, because T is where it's at, the trends. That's
So
where
it
it's
all
at.
comes back to money
It
again.
all comes back to money. So I've thought of something this week that I want to set up.
Gays against, I love it. We will
Gay
not be gagged.
against gender.
Yes,
Okay?
I love
Exposing
it.
the dark side of gender. We will not be gagged. The newsletter is going to be called The Reflex. I've had, God, we really need to wrap it up, but this I'll, okay, and then I'll finish. I was at a little barbecue party a few months ago. It was the first thing we could do when lockdown
Oh,
restrictions were eased. So it's the first time I'd had a social. And one straight woman asked, you know, I've been reading about J.K. Rowling, and what is this conflict between like trans rights and women's rights? And I thought this is good, because when somebody has a question, they're open to receiving information. And with all this stuff, I sometimes feel like I'm a big, huge water tank with 1,000 liters, but you can only drip feed, otherwise you overwhelm people.
mhm.
Like already, you know, we've been talking for nearly 3 hours now, I think. And there was another gay guy, and he wouldn't let me get a word in edgeways. And whatever I said, he became really aggressive,
Oh, wow.
super aggressive. And he's like, "You're lying. It's bullshit." And I was just talking about factual stuff.
Wow.
And like where I start is with opinions of trans people. I'm like, well, this person, trans person says this, and this trans person says that. So they can already see there is not one trans narrative or one trans opinion. And he just wouldn't let me speak. And it
Wow.
became really aggressive. And this is supposed to be your friend.
Yeah.
And the same thing in the pub, right? Those guys really turned against me. And they said I was being transphobic. And I'm like, why are you being so angry? And he's like, well, you start stirring shit, you're going to get it back. And I'm like, I just mentioned two trans people have different opinions. It ignites something.
Wow.
And I think it's because as gay men, we have gone through a lot of shit. We identify with that. We don't want anybody else to go through with it, to go through that. And we also assume, as I have done, that for trans people it's worse than it was for us. And we want to protect them from that at all cost. So it's a genuine sense of compassion, but it's misguided when it's misinformed.
Especially because the women are going through all this and there isn't the compassion or the allies for women
Right.
who are
I've
concerned.
done it myself, right? So
Yeah.
I try to check myself and say, but you did that yourself, Menno, because that gives me an insight into other people that are now
Yeah.
putting up the resistance. So 2 years ago at Pride, a group of lesbians sort of hijacked the start of the parade to highlight lesbian erasure.
Yes.
And I heard, so I was part of the parade, and we are like, can we get started, please? But there was a delay because of that. And all I thought, I dismissed it in my head like this: oh, bunch of grumpy lesbians, which is lesbophobic, it's misogynistic. But that's how easily I passed it off. I dismissed it. Now I know, and now I feel I owe them an apology, right? Because they were there ringing the alarm bells. And we're just going, la, 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 it's Pride, la, la, la. And it's going to be very hard, because the resistance I'm going to get from the gays is going to be violent.
And I worry a little bit about you because of that.
Well, you have to have what's that expression? The courage of your convictions.
Yes.
And that's what this comes down to. Are you going to permit something? Because then you're promoting it. Have the courage of your convictions and know what it is that is happening and know what you're talking about. Don't just say, oh, cis is linguistically helpful. No. What is this part of this vocabulary? Do you
Right.
have a gender identity? No, you don't. Neither do I. I'm a man because I acknowledge my body and I acknowledge that my body is me and I am my body. Have you looked at that report from psychology that said within psychiatry, actually, there is no consensus that every single person even has a gender identity or that gender identity is a valid concept. But if you argue this, then on the other side, they will say that I'm the one who's being unscientific.
Right. Yeah. And
It's
it is, that's
growing.
where they've appropriated language so, so well. And I've heard people say, you know, they've done just a tremendous marketing job on this because
Tremendous.
they've appropriated the language. But I think it's important for us to start, you know,
Take the
taking it
language
back.
back.
And I love are you on that, the G.A.G, the group, are you seriously going to do that newsletter, or is it just something you're toying with?
I just came up with it this
Yeah.
week. So this is it, gays against gender. And it's
Yeah.
because it's against gender stereotypes.
Right.
It's against it's against saying if a boy is effeminate, you've got the right to bully them.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And it's much braver for a man to stand up in a dress with a beard and say, I'm a man, than for that person to
I
stand
agree.
up and say, I'm non-binary, trans feminine.
Right. I
Because now
agree.
there's a difference between trans feminine and trans femme. It's like, yeah, oh, you're kidding. We see you. This is the emperor's new clothes, and
Yes.
we see you. And in terms of the marketing job, this is the Pied Piper. Do you know that story?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
This is the rat catcher
Yes.
saying to the children, and I'll leave you with this, and it's really dark, and I would rather leave you with something more uplifting. But I just thought, because I think in songs so much, I imagine myself as the CEO of AbbVie, ABBVIE.
Which is a company that makes Lupron.
They make the blockers and the hormones and the painkillers. And I'm talking to my team, rather singing. And I'm singing this song because this is our mission as a company. Because as I said earlier, it's not about the children, it's not about the parents, it's not about the relationships that are destroyed, it's not about the lives, it's not about the bodies. I believe the children are our future. Catch them early, tell them something's wrong, that their bodies don't fit their identities. Give them a valid case for dysphoria, then give the solution. They'll beg to jump on the transition train.
Oh, that's so true.
This is what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
We're dealing with the autogynephiles. We're dealing with the young men identifying as trans, taking pictures of their erections in the women's toilets. We're dealing with the sissy bimbo femboys. It's not just the people who just want to go about their daily life and live in peace.
And to those, I actually have just incredible compassion because they're also going to have backlash, huge backlash because of this.
It invalidates everything.
Yeah. Well, Menno, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. We'll have to talk again, maybe in a year. I always think it would be fun to follow up and see where everybody is in a year and see where we are as a culture, assuming we even exist. Yes.
Right, we'll all be brains floating in an aquarium with one eye blinking away. I'm going to have some chamomile infusion.
Oh, infusion. Yes, enjoy your infusion. All right, thanks, Menno.